Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Professor Olander, and today we're going to be revisiting the Hardee's drill series that we've been working on. In the first two videos, I did multiple maneuvers. In this one, we're going to be focusing on just one. The guys in War of Rights have been toying around with a lot of movements and some drill as what's going to be available to them to be able to do in the game. And this one is probably one of the more common ones. Of course, they've done some wheelings, they've done some facings. Typically in that game, the guys have been doing more of 2-rank maneuvers, but I'm going to stick with 4 ranks just because it's there in case you want to use it. This particular maneuver is what you would do whenever you want to go from a column, which is this formation right here. It is not a column of 4s, it's just called a column, or this is the marching by the flank. And you can see that we're 4 men abreast and the entire length of the company. So what you would do is you would be marching down the road, as you do, because a column tends to move faster than a line because you have less to waver on you. So you're only marching 4 men abreast as opposed to 50 men where the line can go back and forth, and it's very hard to maintain your dress, and things kind of get disorganized. And that was one of the critical things with these tactics, is that the maintaining of the line was critical. When you have lines that become longer and longer, the further you get away from the command, either the captain or the lieutenant or whatever, the more vulnerable you are to disorder. And a keen enemy will play upon that weakness. They will exploit any weaknesses that they see, any gaps in the line that they see. They can charge against a gap in a line. As a matter of fact, that's what cavalry used to love doing. They would look for units that were disorganized, and then they would charge after them. And once they split the line and broke it, that would just annihilate any chance of trying to keep cohesion between different regiments. So if one regiment was starting to waver, cavalry might go in and they might hit that regiment very hard. That regiment might break and retreat. Then that leaves the next regiment beside them exposed. So the maintenance of the line is very, very critical. The other thing about this position, or about this formation, is it's very vulnerable. Column formation is the most dangerous position for any attacking unit. As you can imagine, an artillery unit or an artillery battery that were firing directly in front of this column would hit everybody, would hit this whole line going back, and would take them out. Artillery loves attacking columns. So if they were out in a line, say, let's see if I can find one here. So if we were in a line formation, like in this one, like here, if you were in a line formation like here, with the exception of the scout that's popped up again, and you were firing from the front with a cannon, you would only hit 1 or 2. Now, if this were a column of companies where you'd have another company behind it and so on and so forth, yeah, you could wreck them. But let's say that there was another regiment over here, there was another company over here, and there was an artillery battery way back here. They could only hit 2 ranks, and they really wouldn't do as much damage. This was the problem at Gettysburg, and a lot of people, it's one of those things that never really gets talked about. One of the reasons why the artillery was ineffective at Gettysburg, aside from the fact that the artillery that the Confederates were using as far as shell was very poor. The majority of the shells that were lobbed at Gettysburg never exploded, which was part of the reason why the bombardment failed. But if you think about it, the way that the guns were lined up was a long line like this. And when they were trying to hit a target that's only about 2 ranks deep, you know, there's only so much damage that you can inflict. Porter Alexander, who was a very young artillery, I believe he was a colonel at the time at Gettysburg. I don't think he had been promoted to general. But he was attached to Longstreet, and what he wanted to do was he wanted to do what was called enfilading fire. Which enfilading fire means that you're kind of off in this direction at a more severe angle of attack, where when you fire a shell or fire a solid shot, you're not going to go through 2 ranks. You know, if it comes in from an angle like this, you're going to hit this guy, you're probably going to get this guy and maybe this guy, and then this guy, and that guy, you know, and anybody else that might be buckled around. And the only reason I'm saying that is because I'm trying to give you an idea of the vulnerabilities of each formation. This formation is one of the safer formations that you can be in. Is actually, as far as Civil War drill goes, this is probably the safest formation you can be in, aside from skirmishers. And skirmishers will be in the next episode. I was going to put them in this one, but skirmishers are their own little thing. It's a little more complicated to explain because of the way that you have to do it. There's several different ways to deploy. But skirmishers are spread out in a long line. The targets are more sporadic, so artillery is basically useless against them because they are so spread out you can't hit them. And as a matter of fact, line infantry is pretty well useless against skirmishers because the line is spread out so thin. So yeah, in terms of safeness, you would go with skirmishers, and then it would come to a line formation, and then the most vulnerable would be the column formation, and then if you count the square would be kind of in between line and actually square would be the most vulnerable against artillery attacks, simply because the line buckles back around on itself. So you would have a line here, you would have a line going this way, you would have a line going this way, and then you would have a line going this way, and then you'd have your officer and your colors in the middle of it. You don't really see that a whole lot in Civil War drill. As a matter of fact, they were moving to get away from it. They would have guard against cavalry, and it was basically in groups of 4s, just because a large square was vulnerable to artillery fire. So let's go back to what we were originally going to talk about, which is we're going to talk about the command by company into line. Now, the purpose of by company into line is you're marching down this road in a column, which is again a vulnerable formation, and a wild Pikachu spawns in front of you. And because you want to catch Pokemon, you can't really throw Pokemon balls from a column formation. You have to get into a line formation. So we're gonna forgive the Pokemon reference. I thought it might be amusing. Yeah, plus Pokemon Go. Isn't he so cute? Isn't he cute? Anyway, getting back to the thing here. The principles behind going by company in the line. Now, I mentioned in the very first video about guides. The guide is whoever is in front. Typically, that's going to be a first sergeant or a corporal. Now, there's a corporal back here behind the first sergeant. The captain's kind of off to the side, which we would assume this is going to be, you know, there's going to be another company up here in front of them. You know, let's say this is a battalion, so company in column here, company in column here, company in column here, and all, and so on and so forth. Now, you would go into, like, if this were a battalion and you wanted to throw it out into a line, there's some more movements that come on beyond this one. But for right now, we're going to focus on the company level. I will say this, though, that all of these maneuvers are designed around battalion level commands. They're There are commands that you need to know to move a company from one position into another position in the battalion as you need it. So going back to what I was saying about guides, the preservation of the front, which would be the line, this is the front. This rank right here, this is where the original front was. If we go back into, if the command was given to front, the original battle line is right here. It's actually these two ranks right here. That guy, these guys, and then these guys. Well, I can't do that. That wasn't what I wanted to do, but it's these guys right here, all the reds on the far right. That's the original front. So this is where the guide is. Now when you do a maneuver like this, you're actually changing which direction the front is in, which means the guide changes. I've said this before, that movements that are done from the right, if you're facing to the right, the movement gets done to the left. And this is no different. So remember what I said about how this is the original line. The first sergeant is not going to move. The first sergeant is going to become the last remnant of the original battle line. So what will happen is you're going to change the direction of the front from this way, and you're going to have change the guide from this way, because when you're facing by the right, the guide is to the left onto this line. You're going to change it from facing this way. The line is going to swing out, and then the guide is going to be in this direction. It's going to be back to the first sergeant, because the first sergeant is holding where the line used to be. Now you might be wondering to yourself, well, why can't you, wouldn't it be easier to do it by company in the line and everybody come this way if you're doing it by the right? Well, think about what would happen if you were to form this company out this way. If everybody arcs around to the right, what would happen is the company would be inverted. You'd have the rear rank would be in front, the right would become the left, and then everybody would lose their count. They would have to count off again, and it becomes very convoluted. So basically what will happen is the command will be given by company into line. And what you're going to do is you're going to form a battle line off of your right guide, who will be our first sergeant. The line is going to move around to the left in kind of an arcing movement. Hardee's doesn't really say a whole lot. He says, you know, the shoulder of the man to your right should be slightly ahead of you. You're basically going to make a huge arc around this way, and then you'll have a company front along this line right here, facing in that direction. So that way we can capture Pikachu. So, I'm just going to scroll through this maneuver real quick, and we'll see him. So the command would be by company into line, and let me get to where we are. You can see everybody kind of does a 45-degree turn to the left. It might be easier to look at it from here. And you see that the first file is going on the line. That would be our corporal, and you see that the captain is stepping out. He is going to be dressing the line as it comes online. I didn't get it exactly right on this, but it's the general premise of it. So let's go through it again, looking at it from this angle. You see everybody kind of peel off, and then one by one they move around each other, and then you see that they start getting in their files, and then they all come onto line, and then there you go. And then the second sergeant will post himself back onto the left of the company, again following the rule. If the left flank of the company is exposed, the first sergeant becomes the guide. So if this company were on the end of the battalion, if this company were the end of the battalion and their left flank was exposed, the second sergeant would be up here. Now this would be the same thing as if we were in a column of companies. The second sergeant would be out because the flank is exposed. So let's go through that one more time. Oops, out of the way. We'll go through it looking at it from this perspective, because this is where the front's going to be. So let's walk through that again. So the company into line. You see that they very slowly start coming into line. As we used to call it, find your parking space. And they one by one come onto line. Now, typically, whenever you do a movement like this, it's going to be done at the double quick. Also, it'll be done at the right shoulder shift. Right shoulder shift is the default arms for any time that you have to move at the double quick. It serves as a couple of different things. One, it is easier to carry the rifle when you're running if it is supported by your neck, which right shoulder shift is. It kind of it hooks around to the back of your neck, so your shoulders are carrying the weight. But aside from that, it serves as a marker to commanders. When you have, this is roughly a quarter the size of what a company would be. So the captain is going to be looking for indicators to tell him that the company is online, because he's not going to have time to look for a sergeant. Sergeants aren't going to have time to seek him out and say that the company's ready or whatever. He's going to look for visual cues. And just like I had said in the first video about this feather in the shako on the sniper back here, or the second lieutenant, what that is, just like these were indicators to commanders to tell them what unit was where, the rifles were indicators of where their men were and if they were ready to move. So you would go to right shoulder shift whenever you're in the movement, and then as soon as you got into your position, when you go to the halt, you would go into shoulder arms. And I can't remember if it's right shoulder shift or if it's support arms or shoulder arms, but for the sake of the game, we'll say that it's shoulder arms because that's the only other arms that's there. So when you start this position, when you get by company into line, the men will automatically go to right shoulder shift without being told. So as soon as you start to move, you'll go to right shoulder shift, and then that will pan out. And then as these men come onto line, let me go again here. So as these files start coming on the line, they will go to shoulder arms. Now what the captain can do in this instant, he can see that some of the files, that this file has come online, this file is starting to go online. If there is an immediate threat to his front, if you see Pikachu pop up and you want to, put a couple of rounds in him, what he can do while the company is forming, because you got to remember this is going to be 100 guys or so, and this line is going to keep on going and going and going. It's going to be 50 men wide. What he might want to do is he'll give the command to fire by file, and he'll say something about fire by file from the right. And what will happen is, as these files come online, this first file will fire, and then the second file will fire, and then as they come on, the third file will fire, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And what happens after that, when you fire by file, after you finish firing, you will commence with what's called independent fire, which means that you just fire as you get loaded. And the purpose for that is it will take a little time for the line to get formed and for everything to get back to where it needs to be, and dressing up everything. So you want to keep a constant rolling fire on them, so when you fire by file, the independent fire will pick up until the company is ready. Once the company finally gets itself out of that formation and gets squared away and everything is dressed and the guides are posted, then the commander will say ceasefire, and then everybody will load and hold, and then he can go whichever way he wants to. So I hope that's not too terribly complicated, but that's just some of the evolutions and why they do things the way they did. That's one of the purposes of fire by file. Fire by file is basically covering your ass while you are getting organized. And you see that a lot. That's one of the things about firing by the rear rank, firing by the front rank. That's one of the things about firing by rank, and especially whenever you're doing on the right by files in the line, which I wanted to do in this video, but it's a more obscure thing, and honestly, on the right by files in the line is really more of a battalion level command. This one is more versatile for use in a company as opposed to on the right by files in the line. because on the right by files on the line, you would basically, just to do a quick overview of it, on the right by file on the line, the command would be given, and the rear rank would mark time, which would be these two files right here. These guys would mark time. These two files would keep marching forward. The first sergeant, or the guide, would actually, he would go out a certain distance, and then he would turn, and then he would come this way, and then he would post himself somewhere over in here, and then the file would basically come out, and then they would arc around this way, and just like a by company in the line would start filtering itself out this way. This is, and the reason why I say this is a battalion level command is it's associated with this maneuver, because as I said, if you imagine we have another company up ahead of us that's in a column formation just like this, and you get the command to change front forward on the first company. Sounds complicated, but what that means is, or it may not be change front forward on the first company, I can't remember the exact command, but basically you want to form a battle line out this way on the very first company in line. And what would happen is you would have all of the companies would be in column formation, you would do it by company into line, everybody would come up into line like that, and then you would do you'd be marching in a column of companies at that point, and then you would get the command left half wheel, so you would left half wheel over, and then you would do, let's see, there's a command for it, and I'm missing it. And you can also do this with on the right by files on the line. So if you had a battalion marching by the flank and you wanted to do, a battle line over in this direction, then you would say on the right by files on the line, which is I think that was the original intent of it. I have to go back and study it a little more. I think this was more if you had an enemy pop up in front of you and you needed to throw out a line very quickly, and if you had an enemy say these were woods over here, and an enemy popped up beside you, and you needed to very quickly throw out a battle line this way, then you might use on the right by file on the line, because then that would come over this way and you'd be facing in that direction. Again, there's a maneuver in Hardee's for everything. These guys, this is what they did. They sat down and they went through every possible scenario. There's stuff in the manuals for obstacles. Like, say there's a rock or a tree in front of us, and it's going to, well, let me go do this. If we're in a line formation and there's a rock or a tree in front of us, there is an actual command in the drill manual for obstacle. You would basically say first company obstacle, second company obstacle. You would tell a company individually what they should do, and then there's a movement for them. They're going to do, they're going to march by the flank, and then they're going to front, and then they're going to do a wheel into line, and it's just, that was what I was trying to think of. Right turn into line. I don't know why it just popped into my head. So if you were doing the left half wheel to go into a battalion line, it would be right turn into line wheel, and then you would turn into line. So yeah, I mean, my brain is full of this stuff, and it's therapeutic for me in a way to get it out, because I had to do this for 12 years. And as I said before, I was a first sergeant with my company for about 3 or 4 years. And the battalion that we were with took drill very, very seriously. So I'm intimately familiar with Hardee's. Or at least I used to be. I've forgotten a lot of it, but it's very slowly coming back to me. So once again, we'll go through this, and remember, this move is going to be done at the double quick. I know a lot of you guys that are in War of Rights are doing this with just 2 ranks. That's fine. The principle is still the same. You're basically going to do a 45 degree, and then you're going to get to your place in line, and then for the guys that are on the rear rank that have to move around, that's all you're going to do. You're just going to watch, and then you're just going to arc around. So let me back up here just a second. So you see that the corporal's going to come online. Then the number 2 man, he's going to walk past him and go in. And then the rear rank man is going to come into line behind the corporal. And then the number 2 man is just going to walk around him. And then he's going to find his place in line and go in. And it's just going to go like that all the way down through the line. They're just one by one by one by one. Now these guys out here on the end, they have all the time in the world because just because of where they are. The guys up in the front always have the hardest job because these guys have got to go through this little narrow gap and then turn and come in. So one more time, we'll just scroll through it here. Just one. I was trying to scroll while I was doing that. One by one by one by one. And that's it. It's as simple as that, and then you have a company in line, and now you can fire. So, with that being said, that is by company line in a nutshell. And I have one thing that I would show. Is this one? This is the movement as shown by Hardee's. This is in the book. This is the actual movement right here. You can see that it just shows 45-degree angle, and you can do this from 2 ranks. But you see it just goes up in a line, they get squared away, and then they just park themselves in line. It reminds me so much of on the right by file in the line, which by the way is right here. But you can read down through here. It really doesn't say a whole lot about it. It just says the men of the rear rank will conform to the movements of the respective file leaders, which, you know, you just follow the leader on that one. And it really doesn't say a whole lot about how to do it. It just, I know it says some stuff in there about they will just get themselves there. It's the polite way of doing it. Again, if you do any reading of Hardee's, it can be very tricky because of the way he words it. So with that, I'm going to let this episode end. Next one will probably be on skirmish drill because that's another popular one that's been going on in War of Rights. I've been trying to... I try and leave units alone whenever they're in War of Rights just because I don't want to interfere with how they're wanting to learn it, because a lot of the guys have come from warband North and South, and because of that they have a certain way that they've been doing it, so I don't want to get in there and mess them up. I'm making these videos for a couple of reasons. One, it's for anybody that might be interested in it, and 2, it's for people that are in War of Rights. You can see how it's actually done, and then you can make it your own. There's no right or wrong way to do it. The way my theory has always been on it is, as long as you can get there, as long as you can get from A to B, and as long as you can get there organized, that is the most important thing about it, because order was the rule of the day, keeping your lines orderly. So I'm going to leave it at that. Like I said, skirmishing will be in the next one, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.